taking out the garbage at the Columbia Hotel.
There's something very surreal and bizarre about seeing, you know, a pop star whose records that you've come to admire walking out the door of the hotel going to get his laundry done.
Sometimes the running order for Top of the Pops looks like an arrivals list at the Columbia Hotel.
I would recommend every young band in Britain making their first trip to London come and stay at the Columbia, because they'll learn a lot in 48 hours in this hotel.
It's a place where you can arrive in any condition. You don't even have to arrive with all your body parts and you're guaranteed a bed.
It's an odd day if we don't have 2 or 3 bands minimum staying with us. Now, I'm not talking about Mr. Jagger and Mr. Elton John, but the pop group type of music. An incredibly large number of them would have come through the Columbia Hotel on their way up. I can only say that if we're known as the Rock and Roll Hotel, I don't really know why. But in about 1984, Teardrop Explodes were put in the hotel.
1980, actually.
And who's the leader of the Teardrop Explodes?
Julian Cope.
That's right, Julian Cope. Anyway, he must have liked it, and it just built up from there.
Teardrops were on this sort of, we wanted to be a British group. We wanted to have a kind of a rock and roll tradition that was our creation, that was British based, and the Columbia was perfect because it was just full of all these characters and it was just deadly cheap at the time. It's kind of side on to the road, which is kind of screwy, but I think that makes sense. I think that gives it its existentialist view, which was so good for like young rock and roll. But it meant that people could whiz by it and not have a clue where it was. And go, oh wow, that's the Columbia, I didn't realise. Once the Teardrops were in, the next people were in, people like the Human League. Then bit by bit more people came in. Till in the end it's really funny. You know, it's like Slade is staying there and all these kind of people.
Back in the early 80s, when I began my career as a music writer, all of the Scottish bands who were big at that time, they all stayed in the Columbia, so it seemed the most sensible thing to stay where they were staying. It's unlike any hotel that you've ever been in anywhere in the world, because if you book a room in the Columbia, your name is entered on these 3 huge, sort of 4 foot long by 3 foot wide, grotty pieces of white cardboard, which are subdivided into squares. And you walk in and say, hi, I'm Billy Sloan and I've got a room booked for tonight. And they say, hang on a minute. And they look at these grotty pieces of cardboard, which are all dog-eared and turn up at the end. I don't know how they do it, but they can tell from that piece of cardboard, you know, which room you're in. It's a sort of ancient hotel form of hieroglyphics, I guess, but only the people behind the desk of the Columbia can understand how it works.
Hello, reservations. Hello, Marla, how are you? The Misfits, just for the one night. Most of our guests will have favourite rooms if they're regulars, and they'll have rooms they dislike. When Jim Kerr from Simple Minds used to stay, he also always had to have the same room, and we often get people phone up and say, can I have the Simple Minds room?
Simple Minds stayed here so often. It's quite weird, actually, because it doesn't look like a rock and roll hotel. It looks very conservative. It's a beautiful building with large, elegant public rooms, and you do imagine when you go into your room cable television and mini bars and, you know, bubble baths and all that kind of exotica. No, you get little bits of soap wrapped up in paper, you know, the kind of thing. Simple Minds were a very big band throughout the 80s, but when they were making a bit of money, they didn't want to move into a posh hotel, but they could afford a wee bit more, so they said, would you mind if we brought our own Downies in and brought some fridges into our rooms, because we used to use this like our London residence.
I lived there for a long while. I think it was 311. But I think I was also in 211 a lot, which is a weird one, because whatever it is, if it's 211, right, somebody's probably now, there's probably some rock and roll going, oh, I beg to differ, that room's not that room at all. But you'd come in, and it was kind of very boudoirish, because it was on 2 different levels. It's a sexy place. Yeah, Dave Balfe, who's in the Teardrops, he'd fight you for that room, because he was very involved with womanhood at that time. I lived there for a long while. There's like 3 beds in a lot of the rooms, so when you live there, you take 2 of the beds out, and you leave the bed shells in the corridor, and eventually the bed shells are never taken back in by the maids. They just sort of assimilate them into the rest of the hotel, which immediately means that it's okay. There'd be weird periods at the Columbia where maybe you'd go on tour and you'd be there just long enough for a new made regime to kick in. And you'd have to reassert yourself.
If we think of English eccentricity and you think of hotels, the most famous hotel is Fawlty Towers. And this reminds me of Fawlty Towers a little bit. It's a bit crazy. There was a guy, Francisco was the waiter, Spanish. Hey, he spoke like this, you know. And he got to know us by name. I'll tell you what it's like, in fact. The Columbia Hotel is a wee bit like Coronation Street or EastEnders. You get a few characters that are there forever, and they are still here.
You always see a friendly face at the Columbia, whether it's amongst the staff or whether it's amongst the rock and roll community. So when you walk in, it's, hi Billy, how are you? You know, how's your mum? It's almost like, you know, going to stay with your auntie for a couple of nights. When you walk in to check in at the Columbia and you see somebody like Mr. Rose, who's a very sort of English country gentleman almost, who owns the place, he sort of walks around the hotel with his smart little suit on, smoking his pipe, and he's seen all these sort of long-haired rock bands come in and all these crazy guys. If there's some kind of wild party in the lounge and they're literally, you know, dancing on the sofas and swinging from the chandeliers, he would just suck on that pipe and, you know, look over the top of his glasses, and I think, you know, one steely stare from Mr. Rose would be enough to let you know that you had stepped out of line and that you shouldn't do it again.
The Columbia Hotel is a family-run hotel. It is a Victorian building, and we try as far as possible to leave that Victorian atmosphere in it. We are a conservative family, and I don't think any of us have any interest in pop music whatsoever. I wouldn't be able to tell you any record in the top 10 for the last 20 years. But the pop groups come into this atmosphere and they do not create this rock and roll image. They come in and assimilate themselves in our environment, and they muck in with the other guests, and the pop groups move in with them.
You'd get some loud group of biddies arriving, right? And they've paid the money, so they want to be loud at, you know, very, very early in the morning. So you come out with no undies on and tell them in a rock and roll way that their behaviour is less than desirable. And they say, whoa, we're going to see the manager. And what's so great is you know that when they go to see the manager's going to say, I'm sorry, but, you know, the guy with no undies is in the right.
Don't mix with the other guests very much. You know, people who were not in the rock and roll business, who were tourists. Tourists are weird. I think they go to bed very early. I think they get up very early and have breakfast long before we come down. We never see them.
It's true to say that the pop groups go to bed last and get up last, and the rest go to bed early and get up earlier than the pop groups. There is quite often a sort of mad scramble for the pop groups to get into the breakfast room just before 10 o'clock so that they can get their breakfast. The breakfast room has 6 waitresses, and they're all under the famous Joan Huckle, who's been with us 23 years. She's the sort of mother figure of the restaurant, and she's unflappable.
Joan, don't mess with Joan. Watch Joan. The rows she would give me. What do you think? What time's this to be coming down for breakfast? Breakfast stops at 10 o'clock. We'd say, but it's only 2 minutes to 10, and then she would be furious. In fact, sometimes she just wouldn't give you breakfast. That was it. You're too late. And very quickly you learned to respect her. And you discovered she wasn't a grumpy Victorian lady after all. She was really a lovely lady. She was like your auntie.
The pop stars come down rather late at the end of the morning because they've been working late at night, haven't they? And they get late calls, so they come down, and we always pull their leg and say, well, this is it, you're late, we're not going to get breakfast today, but they do get it. They look at us, and it's a good English breakfast they get, quite a nice egg, bacon, sauce and tomato, fried bread, and they think that's terrific, and plenty of orange juice. But they nearly all come back, but I don't know who they are. Just a simple man, I do remember those. They were quite sweet and very nice and polite to us. Julian Cope, he'd say, good morning, Joan, and I'd say, good morning, Julian. We got to know quite friendly with one another, you know. So that's it. I'm surprised there's so many pop groups to make a living in it. So.
There's many people that I've met here that I used to idolise. shatters a few illusions because you don't think of these people as real. They're just gods that you stick on your bedroom wall as a teenager, and then you meet them and you chat to them, and they're just people like everyone else with a living to make. And it's very interesting to see some of them just take to fame like a duck to water and enjoy it and don't change much. And others, it goes to their heads, and well, you've seen in the papers what some of them do.
We had periods of madness in Colombia. Yeah, there's some of those inner rooms that don't have any light. There's this big balustrade coming all the way down. One's crawled right from the top to the very, very bottom. And when you've crawled into the Columbia and crawled through reception, and the staff don't mind, then you know that you're there.
The Columbia has over the years had more than its fair share of outrage. There was a band who, used to chat up women and you couldn't get in the lift for them, having romantic dalliances with female guests and stuff. There's been the odd incident of people, chucking things out of the window, nothing like TVs or anything, maybe just books or something like that.
I think all of us have our one moment, at a birthday party or something, or New Year's Eve, we'll let the hair down and you make a fool of yourself and you think, never again. Rock and roll, it's like that every single night. And you get this rock and roll excess that we all read and hear about. And there have been so many artists stayed here, wild rock groups, that inevitably there have been moments of madness in this hotel. And we have been told to keep quiet from time to time. But that's all you get. Can you guys cool it? Yeah, sure. You take it from them because they're human.
This whole idea of pop groups rushing into a rock and roll hotel and having mad all-night orgies and trashing the hotel up, it doesn't happen. If you, when they come in, treat them properly, they're going to treat you properly. There is obviously a small minority who think that it's clever to trash up a hotel because they've read somewhere that pop groups trash up hotels, and we ban them. But this is not special for pop groups. If anyone else did the same thing, we'd ban them.
I always used to hate those school teachers, who, the young school teachers who come in when you're a bit older and they go, "Hi, my name's Michael, you can call me Michael." And then they completely screw you. See, the thing was with the Columbia, it wasn't like that. They would allow you to run riots and then they'd back you up, so long as they knew that you weren't a bad person.
In terms of total outrage, I think those days are gone. I think that the modern pop star would be more liable to tidy up his hotel room rather than trash his hotel room.
The Columbia will always be the Columbia. It is as legendary as the Chelsea Hotel in New York. It's 10 times better because it's a mistake. It is not contrived. This is the real McCoy.